What's going on, everyone? Kyle Yates here with the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. Thanks for joining us. As always, you can find our brand new content every week at youtube.com/fantasypros, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow while you're there. Let's get right to it, because today we're taking a look at the fantasy football implications of the upcoming Thursday Night Football matchup. Each week moving forward, we'll be taking a look at the fantasy options in the Thursday Night Football matchup and giving our general thoughts on whether these players should be viewed as starters in your lineups or sits. For the purposes of this exercise, a starter is viewed as a top 30 option in running back rankings, a top 40 option in wide receiver rankings, and a top 15 option in quarterback and tight end rankings. Inversely, the sits are players that fall outside of that range. This week, we have the Carolina Panthers and the Houston Texans facing off. At the time of recording, the Betting Pros consensus over-under is extremely low at 44.5 points, which means that Vegas doesn't anticipate a whole lot of points going up on the board, but we know that there are certainly some very valuable fantasy options in this matchup. Let's dive in. Carolina Panthers. Sam Darnold, quarterback. Sam Darnold looked like purely a game manager in week 1 against the Jets, but he was able to open things up a bit more in week 2 and actually put together a solid performance against the defense that had just completely shut down Aaron Rodgers. Darnold was able to hit the 300-yard benchmark while averaging 8.0 yards per attempt and found the end zone twice. Looking forward to week 3, Houston's allowing an average of 2 passing touchdowns per game so far, and Darnold could easily return value as a streaming option in this matchup. There are some better options you can pivot to this week, but if you're in a pinch, Darnold should be available on your waiver wire to scoop up and play. Christian McCaffrey, running back. While Christian McCaffrey had a massive game last week against New Orleans, it could have been even more impressive than Derrick Henry's performance. CMC was brought down at the 1 or 2 yard line on multiple occasions last week, which if he was just a couple of feet further would have meant a ridiculous outing. At this point, there's no reason we should doubt McCaffrey finishing the season as the #1 fantasy football option again. He's seeing a workload like no other running back in the league, and he's reminding everyone why he's truly one of, if not the best running back in the entire NFL. Against the Houston Texans that saw Nick Chubb rumble for 95 yards and a score on them last week, CMC's back in the RB1 spot in my weekly rankings. DJ Moore, wide receiver. Through 2 weeks, DJ Moore now has 19 targets, 14 receptions, 159 receiving yards, and a touchdown to his name. He's putting on a show this season and reminding everyone why he's one of the more underrated wide receivers in the entire league. He's averaging 2.21 yards per route run, he's averaging 3.8 yards after the catch per reception, and he's thriving in contested situations as well with a 75% contested catch rate according to PFF. The Texans are not going to have an answer for Moore this week, and he should continue to see a significant target share in this offense. You can start him as a mid-range wide receiver 2 with upside yet again. Robbie Anderson, wide receiver. In 2020, Robbie Anderson was a fantasy football steal due to the target volume he was seeing in this Carolina offense. Fast forward to 2021 though, and it hasn't been as smooth for the veteran wideout. He's now only seen 8 targets through 2 games, which equates to a mere 10.9% target share. He still has the big play potential that we saw during his time in New York, so he'll still have value as a flex option week in and week out. However, the days of us viewing Anderson as a surefire wide receiver 2 seem to be behind us. Against the Texans, we could see a big play or 2 from Anderson, but the floor is a bit lower than we might want to see. He can be viewed as a low-end wide receiver 3/high-end flex play for week 3. Terrace Marshall Jr., wide receiver. Terrace Marshall has remained involved in this Panthers offense through the first 2 games, but there's a clear hierarchy here when it comes to targets. Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore are at the top of the food chain, and Marshall is left vying for the leftovers. Unless we see Moore miss time with an injury, Marshall's probably not worth considering for your starting lineups, even in deeper leagues. Dan Arnold, tight end. Dan Arnold saw his usage tick up this past week against New Orleans, and he reeled in 3 catches for 55 yards. With that being said, it's still not enough volume to comfortably rely on the veteran tight end for fantasy purposes. He can remain on your league's waiver wire. Houston Texans. Davis Mills, quarterback. Davis Mills is going to get the nod here as the starting quarterback for the Texans in week 3 with Tyrod Taylor ruled out with a hamstring injury. With the surrounding cast he has around him, plus the seemingly difficult matchup, Mills shouldn't be considered for starting lineups in week 3. Mark Ingram, running back. If you had told me before the start of the season that Mark Ingram would have more carries through 2 weeks than David Montgomery, I would have told you that you were beyond insane. However, that's where we're at right now with the NFL and this already wacky season. While Ingram is receiving the majority of the workload for the Houston Texans, it's still not equating to reliable fantasy production. Ingram saw 14 carries against the Browns in Week 2, but it only resulted in 41 yards and no score. If you're in an absolute pinch, Ingram can be picked up off of the waiver wire and started, but he presents little to no upside any given week. David Johnson, running back. David Johnson has seen 14 touches through the first 2 weeks, and he's failing to do much with that limited opportunity. At this point, Johnson can be dropped to your waiver wire if you haven't done so already. Philip Lindsay, running back. Philip Lindsay found the end zone again in Week 2, but he only received 6 total touches. This is too small of a workload for us to rely on him for fantasy football in any way, and he can be kept on your league's waiver wire. Brandin Cooks, wide receiver. Previously, there had been some discussion centering around the other receiving options that the Texans have on their roster. There was the potential that someone else could step up and take advantage of the projected passing volume if the Texans were playing from behind a lot. However, those discussions should be happening no longer after what we witnessed in Week 2 from this offense. Brandin Cooks saw a 48% target share in Week 2, which resulted in 14 total targets. The next highest target share on the team resulted in only 2 targets. Cooks has shattered expectations every single place he has been throughout his career, and he's doing it again here in Houston. He now has more targets on the season than Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, and is performing well with the opportunity. Even with the quarterback play this week, Cooks can be viewed as a safe high-end wide receiver 3. Carolina Panthers, DST. The Carolina Panthers have surprisingly been one of the toughest matchups for opposing quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends through the first 2 weeks. Against the Houston Texans offense that will feature Davis Mills as the starting quarterback this week, Houston is a fantastic streaming matchup. Houston Texans, DST. The Houston Texans appear to be going nowhere fast now that Tyrod Taylor is out for the next few weeks, and the Panthers offense has been starting to click. We shouldn't be looking at the Texans defense this week for our fantasy lineups.